In the early 20th century, a new intellectual current swept through Europe. Artists, writers, and thinkers shared a collective urgency to break with historical precedent and rebuild civilization based on the logic of the machine. For centuries, the academic tradition viewed reality through neoclassicism, using precise draftsmanship and a strict vanishing point to lock viewers into a fixed, idealized viewpoint. Cubism rejected that rigid framework. By fracturing form and collapsing multiple, simultaneous viewpoints onto a single canvas, painters like Picasso proved that the traditional frame was a social construction rather than a physical necessity. This intellectual rejection of the fixed frame in art mirrored a physical crisis brewing in construction. The same impulse to dismantle traditional enclosures was moving from the canvas to the building site. The decision to strip away historical ornament wasn't just a change in taste, it was backed by a structural evolution. Architects were moving away from the massive, load-bearing masonry wall in favor of the localized efficiency of the point-load frame. In traditional masonry, height and stability are achieved through sheer mass. For a building to stand, its walls must be thick and continuous to carry the heavy downward compression of the roof. Gravity transfers the crushing weight of the structure directly through the exterior walls. Because the wall is the primary support, any attempt to pierce it with large windows creates structural instability, leaving interiors dark and restrictive. This was bypassed by structural steel and reinforced concrete, materials handling immense stress with minimal volume. They allowed architects to isolate weight into a grid of thin columns. The structural skeleton was no longer synonymous with the exterior envelope. By separating the two, architects were no longer forced to design buildings as solid enclosures. They could treat the structure as a skeletal system and the walls as a lightweight, independent skin. Louis Sullivan provided the philosophical grounding for this shift with a single axiom: form follows function. It was a directive to strip away any architectural element that didn't serve a building's specific structural or spatial needs. Le Corbusier formalized this into a rigid system, viewing the house as a machine for living in, and used Villa Savoye to prove architecture could be reduced to 5 distinct structural points. This plan reveals the physics of the concrete frame. Point 1. Pilotis carry the weight, freeing the ground. Point 2. The free plan. Columns handle gravity, allowing non-load-bearing walls to snake fluidly anywhere. Point 3. The free facade becomes a thin, independent, non-structural skin. By solving for gravity through a localized grid, Le Corbusier transformed the building from a fixed carved object into a series of flowing, interconnected voids. Point 4. The ribbon window. Since the exterior skin doesn't carry weight, architects are able to slice continuous horizontal bands across the entire facade. Unlike small, punched windows of masonry buildings, this ribbon delivers perfectly even daylight and creates a panoramic view, pulling the countryside into every room. Point 5. The roof garden. To reconcile the building with nature, Le Corbusier reclaimed land lost to the footprint by utilizing the flat concrete roof. By turning the roof into a landscaped terrace, the architecture extends the living space into the open air and sky. Collectively, these 5 points achieved Le Corbusier's goal: a highly rational, efficient environment where every spatial decision is driven by purpose rather than ornament. While the core principles of modernism were universal, different pioneers applied this structural liberation to reach different philosophical conclusions. Ludwig Mies van der Rohe practiced a more extreme reduction, summarized by the phrase, "less is more." For Mies, beauty was achieved not by adding, but by removing the superfluous. He designed the Farnsworth house as a house reduced to its absolute essence, stripping away even the rational enclosures used by Le Corbusier. The entire structure relies on just 8 exposed steel columns, holding 2 flat slabs. Because the load is handled entirely by the frame, the walls on all 4 sides are made exclusively of floor-to-ceiling glass. Mies used modern construction to make a moral argument that honesty, structural precision, and total transparency were the highest virtues an architect could achieve. In America, Frank Lloyd Wright rejected the rigid, machine-like international style in favor of what he called organic architecture. Wright argued that a building shouldn't hover over the landscape as a foreign object, but should grow from its specific site like a natural formation. Falling Water, built directly over a waterfall in Pennsylvania, serves as the masterpiece of this ideology. Wright used reinforced concrete to engineer massive horizontal cantilevers that reach out over the water, locking the building directly into the site's natural rock. By removing the need for rigid structural walls, Wright blurred the boundary between the interior and the forest, making the ambient sound of the rushing stream and the lush view of the canopy functional parts of the living room. He used the tools of industrialization to achieve the opposite of a machine, creating a structure that is inseparable from the specific earth it sits upon. The movement transitioned architecture from a discipline of historical mass to one of active engineering, replacing the passive carving of walls with the deliberate manipulation of gravity, light, and open space.